Welcome to the Spirited Discussions podcast, where we dive deep into topics all related to Spirit Island. Today, we're joined by a member of the community, Ray. The topic of today's discussion is vengeance. Ray, how did you start getting into Spirit Island? Where did your adventures begin?
Yeah, Spirit Island was actually, one of my first complex board games. I didn't actually know about, the world of board games, BGG, or stuff like that back in 2018, so 7 years ago. And I got invited to, some group for some different, games or whatever, and Spirit Island was kind of that first one.
Whenever you say complex, you mean like pretty heavy, like in terms of BGG, 4 out of 5 weight or higher?
Kind of, uh, I mean, complex in um, probably like even just two or above.
Okay.
Most people only really know kind of like very casual party games. Werewolf, and Catan and stuff like that. So I was familiar with those, but there's kind of a world beyond that.
And then you just dove into the deep end.
Yeah, I was familiar with complex games just because I play a lot of different strategic games like online, kind of like Civ 5. I was really familiar with and StarCraft, so it wasn't too much to handle or anything like that. So I was just curious like what existed in like the physical space.
Do you think that what you learned from those heavier, complex video games transferred to being a good Spirit Island player?
I don't even know if they did. In all honesty, there's just different concepts, and maybe it influences the way you can think about things, and the approach to learning the game and improving at the game. Because everybody starts out, and it's going to be more difficult than like we expect. Even just for those games, you can't just like dive in and expect to be really really good.
100%. So what holds you in to Spirit Island other than just your friends? Hey, come and play with us.
I mean, it was probably just the aesthetics. The cover art and the design of it looked really appealing. Some of the other games are a little bit more gloomy or dark, or don't use kind of these colors in like a really fun way or anything. But Spirit Island really popped out, like that light blue base game box.
I agree. It's very vibrant. The artist did a great job making it feel inviting. So, to put a frame around the rest of our discussion, what difficulty do you usually play at now?
I usually still kind of just hover within single adversary level 6. I really enjoy kind of the that puzzle, and even micro puzzles or micro challenges that you can put yourself through at that level to kind of artificially increase the difficulty. For like a small example, maybe like I want to try a spirit onto a particular board, or board D, and see how little blight I can take into Scotland or something.
Cool. Cool. That's roughly the scale or the difficulty that I play at, just single adversary level 6. So we'll be able to relate to each other, I'm sure.
Yes.
So, pertaining to vengeance, was this your first spirit? I mean, that's the true deep end. Or did you play a bunch of other spirits and then find vengeance? What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, so when I started, uh, basically we only had the base game and Branch and Claw available. And the Jagged Earth Kickstarter was actually starting up in 2018 October timeframe. So I mostly explored Fangs as my first spirit, believe it or not, which is another one that's kind of on the more difficult end. At least I think many players find it quite difficult due to its restrictions.
I would tend to agree.
But I really, really enjoy tokens within Spirit Island, and I think a lot of people might be able to relate to that. So, Beast tokens are probably my favorite token, and then Disease would be right after that. So those are kind of the initial attraction points, just anything that can really start utilizing, these other pieces that exist within the game, really had me interested.
Another really big token spirit is lure. They use all of the tokens.
Yes.
Does vengeance like appeal to you in a way more than lure does?
Yeah, yeah. So the first thing is probably the artists kind of like catches my attention.
Yeah.
So in a different way than lore, vengeance has kind of this style to it. I can't really describe it, but it's just something I particularly am attracted to. And the artist, shout out to Damon or Damon Westenhofer. He also did the art for, or she, I'm not sure, did for Downpour, and Downpour's art is also really phenomenal. So uh, just based off of those, like in a different way, that was captivating to me too. Besides the tokens.
Awesome. I really like Downpour's art. Vengeance is it almost feels off-putting to me. I like it visually, but I don't know. I think it's just the disease.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot actually from a lot of people. Some people don't really, um, mesh with its kind of artistic design, as compared to Downpour at least.
Mhm.
But um, I like the theming of it as well. It kind of exists as like a solid or physical entity, but also within its kind of like lore and stuff, it doesn't have to exist physically. It exists kind of like amorphously and kind of like moves around and transitions with the theme of like plagues and everything. So
Yeah, are you a bit of a lore guy?
not too much, but for spirits that I'm really attracted to, I try to pay attention to it.
Not all the time, but when the time comes, you're like, yeah, let me get into that.
Yeah,
Okay. Do you appreciate, like, as lore, vengeance existing within the game? A lot of other
yeah.
spirits are kind of beneficial or ambivalent towards the Dahan, but
Hmm.
vengeance is hostile. Maybe not to the Dahan, but to humans.
Yeah, I think I really like how vengeance was incorporated into the lore. I think it gives it another dimension rather than just seeing everything as positive and beneficial in those aspects. And vengeance is kind of on the opposite end. It's not so much beneficial, and uh, it has some strong association to the land, but also strong ties to the invaders in the Han, and it wants to do its own thing. Um, but when things disturb it, or it gets kind of awoken either by these spirits, or the Dahan, or potentially ravages, it can just cause havoc in different ways, in unexpected ways, and it kind of just feels like it wants to do what it wants to do.
He feels dangerous.
It's definitely dangerous, for those that love to keep the Dahan around too.
Yeah, he's one of the spirits that actually can hurt the Dahan. Not by not just ignoring them and letting the Ravage hurt them, but actually hurting the Dahan.
Yeah, and it's not even to its intention. It's just kind of a passive, detriment. Yeah, for the spirit kind of being, within the space of or confines of like the island at that time. Some other cool stuff we actually end up learning from Vengeance's lore is like, the Hearth Vigil, which when Jagged Earth came out, we didn't know what that was going to be like, but it eventually came out with NI. So I always really like when future spirits or ideas of spirits are incorporated into another spirit's lore. It always gives something really fun to look forward to.
Yeah, part of the setup is that we have a town on the or a city on the coast, a town somewhere inland, and disease on land number two. That's almost
Hmm.
like an implicit vengeance was here.
Yeah, it has also, I think, ties to like the invaders sometimes coming in and bringing disease with them. So you can't kind of tell whether it was that or if it's caused, a little bit by vengeance being in that area as well.
Hmm. So what makes vengeance stand out? Is it just the tokens, or is there something more?
I think a big part of vengeance for me is the strategy is really not straightforward. especially since a core part of its disease or strategy is to generate and kind of utilize disease in various different strategical ways. So tokens is a part of it, but overall, it's really unclear, which means there's a lot of ways to interpret it and like choose the direction of. Um, so that type of depth can be, quite overwhelming for many people. Where compared to like River, maybe there's like a straightforward strategy or way to play them, but with Vengeance, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Even on its like third growth option, it has the opportunity to opt out of a presence placement in order to place disease, which we may go into later. But that's a really crazy option that's, most people would be like, why would I ever want to give up a presence?
Yeah, it's a lot of questions to ask before you've played any cards.
Right. And the other thing is it incorporates blight into its strategy. So, and on top of blight usually being a really negative thing in the game, and most people really don't like, taking blight, it results in kind of an overall positive net benefit to Vengeance's, scaling or overall capabilities in the game. So that's really different than some normal spirits.
I agree. Something that I feel when I'm playing Vengeance is not only is it hostile to the in-game humans, but it's hostile to me. I feel like it's kind of antagonistic to the player.
I could see that. It's like you don't really want, to destroy your presence for Lance to Blight, and then you kind of have to come to terms with it, and it feels a little bit bad.
Yeah, just a little bit. Um, it was a big challenge for me to go learning how to play the spirit.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot.
So, Vengeance is the premier DZ spirit. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think overall I pretty much agree. We know like there's kind of Rot, which is an apocrypha spirit that kind of came out before it. Eric had designed at a convention with, the fans.
Yeah.
But I think Vengeance is kind of the, disease king so far within SI. Maybe there's something in the future that, overtakes kind of the throne. But for me, it's definitely Vengeance. It's so important to its theme, and it's really strongly incorporated into kind of all its capabilities. SR, innates, growth. It's all over the spirit. So it's really hard to say, there's something that's more representative of a disease spirit than them to me.
hmm The other disease spirit that stands out to me is Wounded Waters,
Mm-hmm.
but they just don't feel like a disease spirit the same way that Vengeance is. How important are the disease tokens? Could you feasibly go about the game without producing a lot of these?
They're quite important, I think, to Vengeance, but just to rein it in a little, they're not so important that you want to generate them at all costs or keep them around at all costs.
So I
Creating
shouldn't
them,
G3 for disease every turn.
that might be a little bit difficult, but who knows if it's possible to win like that. I certainly haven't explored doing that, but it sounds like a fun option nonetheless. Creating them definitely offers some really deep strategic choices, and that's the main appeal to them.
Whenever you're making the disease and moving them around, are you making like a big disease mountain, or are you trying to have a couple of piles here and there?
It's a fun question. It's actually a lot more difficult from my perspective to answer than someone who may have a different experience playing Vengeance. I think to answer this, I'm going to talk about Plague Bearer as one of Vengeance's uniques,
Okay.
and probably one of the most unique powers in the game. It's a deviation off of Wash Away. So Wash Away is one of River's uniques, which allows you to move, towns and explorers, which is just the basic of it. But for Vengeance, Plague Bearers moves things with a disease. Disease has to be there in order for you to get, the push for these like towns and explorers. So when I have a fun story, which Shout out to another player in the Discord space, Long. When we were practicing some vengeance together into different matchups, um, even on a pretty basic early game, early turn, just one disease token present. If it's in a land with a Dahan, an Explorer, and a town, you can have like up to 13 different opportunities for how you want to move that disease around in the land. Whether it's, putting it into that mountain pile that you want to put it in a new land with nothing, or you want to move the pieces together to another land with blight or something where you have, your damage amp. Like, there's so many different choices that all lead to a different game and how you want to play your game. And I don't think there's a right way to do it. You can kind of choose any of these and play into any of them in different ways. And that's kind of one of the allures of the strategic depth Vengeance offers.
Yeah, that ability can sometimes feel so overwhelming.
It is.
If you have two disease and two explorers and two towns, that's six pieces that you could move, and they could all go into the same land. You could split them up as long as the disease is following one of the invaders. It's so much.
It's a lot, and then that's just the movement is the doorway. Think about, like, on the future turns, how is that going to impact them? What if the land never comes up again? What if it comes up again? What if coasts are up? What if coasts are not up? Like, there goes, every time you start adding a little bit more into it, it gets deeper and deeper, and it becomes even more overwhelming.
But their 2-cost disease placement, it's one of those simpler cards. It has no restrictions, so you can place it anywhere.
It has a restriction on invaders, actually.
You're right, but that usually means anywhere.
It's pretty important, my perspective.
I find myself mulling where to place that disease more often than I expected.
Yes, I think, this card, I have a long history with this card. I totally agree with you. Like, where to place this, how to place this is a big thing. There's a lot of times where I've wanted to place it in empty lands and then had to double check back that it does have that restriction that it has to be with invaders, just because, like, maybe I drafted a card that, initially I wanted to place it, somewhere, and then the draft alleviated that. So that restriction does come into play the more you start playing Vengeance and utilize this card, and you're like, well, dang, I have to place it with the invaders. But to maybe go into the history a tiny bit, it might be fun.
Yeah.
I used to think and dislike the unique at first because it's 2 cost to essentially place a disease for a fear. And if you look at kind of the different minor powers in the deck, you're like, why does this cost 2 when all the other minors maybe have more elements with disease, or only cost 1 and do the same effect, fear and disease. But over time, after talking with Ted, after playing the Spirit more, after learning more about Spirit Island, you realize that if this card kind of costed the same as the other disease, adding cards and everything, or had certain restrictions, then it wouldn't be, too unique or different. You'd kind of want to keep it and you'd want to use it a lot, or you might not want to get rid of it. But having a card that the Spirit is, like, integral to the Spirit, but it also doesn't want to play it so much and kind of wants to get rid of it, is really healthy for the Spirit's, like, strategy and depth, I think.
I agree. I want to play it at least once before I'm reclaiming, and I usually want to play it again throughout the game, but I'm never particularly excited to play it, as it is expensive.
Right. It's about the same thoughts with me. Like, sometimes there's you usually want to get it at least one time to start getting the disease on the board, but playing it more than once starts to have a little bit more consequences because it can become really costly. It's like, how much do I really need it? Is it going to be doing something really worthwhile? Like, could it prevent that, like, critical build or something? And it's hard. It causes tension, which is a really good thing, I think.
For sure. So preventing critical builds, how often do we let the fear happen or the building happen or not happen?
It's always a really interesting choice because you have to do it before you see the explore.
Yeah.
And that could mess you up if you're not careful. Preventing builds, you have to be careful of the back to backs a lot of times, mostly because in single six, those can be quite deadly. If opportunities present themselves to do that, it could allow you to get ahead much further if there's only an explorer. And you prevent that town, and then it clears itself out with the Han or something like that. More often than not, though, I'm letting builds through and compensating via plague bearers to get the same situation, or waiting until mid to late game where I think I'm closer to winning. Terror level 2, switching over to Terror level 3, and we can prevent critical city builds. So consuming those disease to prevent cities is more often, I think, the strategical, oh yeah, this feels really good.
Yeah. I'm forming heuristics. I've played like 30-ish games of the Spirit in the last couple of weeks. So I have like a decent idea. But whenever I was learning, I said, always get the fear.
Yeah.
That's how I'm gonna learn. Just always get the fear and see what happens.
Yeah, it's a good way to start. I don't think there's like a, right or wrong way to play it. The more you do that, the more you think, you know, if something went right or something went wrong. If it goes right, you're always just like, well, that felt good. But if stuff starts to go wrong and you look back on it and you're like, huh, I could have prevented, that town from
Yeah.
coming up and that would have allowed me to go further. Then you start thinking, like, when could I do this? Finding that's a lot harder, than
Yeah.
asking it.
If there's 3 or more disease in one land, I'm pretty sure I'm always letting them build. It looks like a good place to keep blowing up. That's one of the
I
heuristics I feel
agree.
pretty confident about.
I would agree with that. Yeah, when you have like one of those sites, just let it pile up.
Uh, Something that I had happen to me was I had a big pile, maybe like land 2, and I destroyed everything, and the pile was just there. And I was like, I can't
Mm-hmm.
move these out. This is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Figuring out how to get the land whittled down and then move them so I can move the disease is a skill. It's a real skill.
Yes. Yeah. Just listening to that reminds me of some past games, but it it becomes a skill definitely to start managing that more. Like how much is too much, in a land before, or like how much do you need to kill? Do you actually really need to kill everything and destroy everything in that land? Versus just destroy some, critical pieces, some towns or, a city or something, and then could I start moving those around to other lands with like the explorers that are left over?
Yeah. Does it feel good to manipulate these tokens?
As I said earlier, I mean, I
You're a
love
tokens
tokens,
guy.
so yeah, interacting with tokens in any way is, a really big joy. So I really love it.
Yeah, it's like a big appeal to Spirit Island. It has all these chunky bits and moving them around. Feels great.
Oh, it feels amazing. You don't normally get to move disease around as well outside of some like very specific majors or stuff like that. So
Yeah,
Vengeance getting to do it when it feels like it is really empowering.
it's very unique. So the back of the board has offense is very high and then fear, then control. Do you think that this is a pretty good heuristic going into the Spirit?
It's so funny. My thoughts are that Vengeance actually is kind of the opposite of what's written there. Now, take this with a grain of salt because my means of measuring, those bars that are listed on the back of the Spirit panel are probably different than how the Spirit Island design team is measuring them. Because they could just be looking at, they have X amount of abilities that affect things in X way, and this is how it's all laid out, formulaically. So that's why it came out that way. But my way of looking at it is more so towards the strategy, what the player's doing, and what the spirit kind of more naturally likes to do most of the time in the game. So I'm going to look at that from like that perspective and how players may, feel aligned towards that perspective rather than like the devs or designers way. So I think the spirit, for the most part, is more control and defensive. Most of the game, you're kind of trying to build up, get a bit stronger, or let the board become kind of your playground, blight, disease, etc. So a lot of that ends up utilizing its skip unique, strike low, or plague bearers to manipulate things around a lot. And its innates are a little bit hefty in terms of the requirements to hit them. So we don't get to do too many of them early without really committing to them. That, makes me feel like most of its game, for the first 4 turns or 5 turns even, you're just being kind of controlled defensive and generating a good amount of fear. I think it has a moderate fear bar, probably not the highest in the game, but it's pretty solid.
It's making
And
fear.
then yeah, it's getting fear, it's pinging points. It's not doing huge chunks, but you're coming along. And there's kind of a lower emphasis on the damage aspects. The like I said, you barely gonna get your innates early. By turn 5, that's when you're starting to hit at least tier 1 of both. Granted, you're playing elementally attuned,
Yeah.
and as it ramps up towards the late game, that's really when you're focusing on your damage. So it's kind of a build up over time to actually reach, what is representative, to the devs, I think, on the back of that panel.
I agree with you. I completely, actually. Whenever I saw that on the back of the panel, it felt weird because you
Mm-hmm.
had mentioned River earlier, and the spirit kind of feels in a little bit of a way where you're pushing things around, preventing things, defending, and
Mm-hmm.
eventually you turn on your innate and you start blowing up
Yeah.
lands. But whenever I look at other offensive spirits, like for example, my favorite spirit, Sun, I am destroying something as early
Oh.
as turn 1.
Yeah. You're able to nuke, the Scotland 2 cities in the starting land if it's,
Exactly.
Sands turn 1 and just hammer it. And Vengeance looks at them and be like, wow,
I'll see you
those are
guys
pretty
later.
big. Not today.
Yeah, I felt that. Like the earliest I was doing one of my innates was turn 4, and it was like
Mm-hmm.
1 to 2 damage. Like this isn't anything.
Yeah.
And then the damage card that you have, I felt like it was frequently reducing my total capable amount of damage per turn. I just didn't
Right.
feel like I was a damage spirit.
Right. There's a lot of limitations and kind of restrictions that are, a little bit obfuscated from really doing that damage. And the thing that's more apparent is, you have disease and you can block builds, you can control things with the disease, and you can prevent them from, damaging the land.
Yeah. I think the coolest thing that made me feel like I was a damage spirit was that light is
Mm-hmm.
Badlands.
Yes. It's a really, really cool ability to augment kind of damage because normally it's really hard to deal damage in Spirit Island. I think it comes at a pretty high cost. And to get 1 extra point of that in those lands for free, essentially, is a really big deal. It modifies like all the lower end cards to be a little bit better, and then it really modifies majors to hit very specific breakpoints that maybe they're a certain cost or something that's just under a particular amount of damage that's not letting you to do as much, but Vengeance gives you that like extra little bit, or it just combines it with Fiery or one of its innates, and then it's able to do a ton more.
Yeah. One of the cooler things is hazard spread across the land because you can take and spread Badlands from the blight. And I think that's so cool that you're spawning tokens that weren't originally there.
Yeah, hazards is Hazards is a fun card. I think a lot of people really love it because it's that token card.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
You get to pop a bunch down everywhere. And with Vengeance, because Blight equals Badlands, that means you get Badlands everywhere.
I think that's really cool. You also have a decent amount of beasts when you're playing the spirit. He doesn't have any actual beast synergies, but a lot of the cards that he likes to take have beasts on them.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and I'm actually really happy that you noticed that. It's one of my, favorite things about some spirits are which I mean, I love beast spirits, of course. I started with fangs, but what other spirits utilize beast tokens really well in kind of a more secretive way, and that just ends up being synergy with a lot of the beast powers being either on elements, adding beasts, or just having synergy with the spirit that end up doing more damage in a way that makes them pretty effective. And Vengeance is one of those. Bringer also another one.
Yes. Something that I really liked about them being secretly a beast spirit is that so many human diseases, plagues come from animals. And so seeing him placing these beasts to cause disease was like a really cool little internal synergy lore wise.
Oh, I love it.
So during growth, I think that you have a lot of options. When is it that you're doing your second growth versus your third one?
Hmm. For G2 second growth, um, I usually think about how to match. This might be a little complex, but the scaling, the tempo, or the pace, of the invaders. Basically, the invaders have some amount of terror stage one cards, and then they get into stage two cards, and then escalations start coming out, and they get a bit more powerful, and that usually ends up being at certain turn timers. So how I choose G2 or G3 is just whether I want to do certain track progression based on what I need to do next turn, or can I afford to get more cards, which will in turn push back my track progression. So, in order to kind of meet those breakpoints and everything, um, it's kind of switching between what do I want to do now, what can I afford to do now, and how does that influence next turn, in order to kind of like choose how I can best reach my goal by like turn 4 or turn 5 specifically.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of spirits can comfortably go all on top or all on bottom for removing presence. And I did not feel that here. I felt like my starting hand was a little too expensive and my starting energy was a little too small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's generally the common feeling. Like if you're going kind of all top, you need to get at least the two card plays. So you're throwing one on bottom there.
Hmm.
Um, but all top to that four really pushes back getting three plays. And Vengeance's end state is it really likes to achieve as best as possible three energy and three card plays. It's really, really strong at that point, but it's not the easiest thing to hit. The easier goals are, three energy, two card plays, or two energy, three card plays. That's mostly what people probably achieve and can see, when they're trying out this spirit. So pushing in a way to achieve three energy and three card plays is the harder progression, to achieve overall, and to keep doing that without having to get stuck, reclaiming your cards when, the invaders eventually get to that turn 5, turn 6, and they're pushing now stage 3 out on you.
Yeah. I found myself getting to be a 2-3
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to get that extra energy. Once when I got there, I felt strong. If I ever did go off the top, getting to be like a 4-2, it was so challenging to get to that third card play, but I really needed to get there.
Yeah, there are ways to do it, but that 4 energy is really just supporting 5 or 6 cost majors. You can do 5 cost majors without the 4 energy, but if you're going to like 6 plus, you generally want it, and then it has to be worth your time. So like stuff that affects multiple lands, irresistible call, void, fire and flood. Those are all opportunities that you can take to play something that's really heavy-handed. Utilize that extra energy bank, and it allows you to kind of slowly keep scaling up to that 3 plays without having to like feel like you have to keep reclaiming stuff.
For sure. How often are you taking a major power?
So for Vengeance's strategies, I like doing both types of builds into all the different adversaries, dedicated top major strategy builds, or, dedicated minor builds, or like mixed amounts. If I'm going top builds, you can take a major, early as turn 2 is a really good starting point, just because it gives you the opportunity to forget Fetid after playing it. So, and it's in your discard, so that just puts another card back in your hand. But more often than not, turn 3 is the point to take majors for top, but players can find this a little bit difficult because they haven't drawn a minor yet if you're doing like a G2, G3 build, and they kind of take a lot of blight to start with, so it's a little blight heavy. So players more have luck with doing growth 3 into G2 into G3 again, and then they get a minor ahead of that, and then a major, which kind of smooths out the experience a little bit. But doing that sets your track scaling back, by 1 presence. So that means your third card play is going to be coming one turn later, and people won't see that effect, until turn 6 or turn 7 comes around. And then for the other build, for like minor builds and stuff like that, usually you can start banking up some energy as long as you pick up some 0 costs along the way, and eventually pull 1 or 2 majors to throw.
Whenever I was looking through, I wish I wrote this down. Uh, there were like 7 or 8 major powers that you could threshold. I think it was on turn 3.
Mm-hmm.
I was really shocked by that. Maybe I
A lot
didn't
of
want
synergy.
to, but there were a large number that were pretty easy to threshold.
Yeah, some of the really fun synergies that you can get there are like Unleash. Um, Man, Unleash is a mega battery for Vengeance. That plus Fiery
Yeah.
just allows you to place presence down, gain your 8 energy and nuke kind of lands however you want, plus the extra damage from both of them, plus your right and 8. Super strong battery for just generating that one. And depends on how much, other minors you get with whatever splash elements are available in order to threshold some of the other ones. But another particular synergy I think is dissolve the bonds of kinship. You can threshold that one on 2 plays as well, and most don't really like or get to utilize that card, but Vengeance utilizes that card like crazy.
Yeah.
And when you finally get to use that on Vengeance for its bottom, thresholded effect, you're like, wow, this is pretty cool.
And dissolve the bonds of kinship for viewers, listeners. It replaces a town, a city, and a Dahan with a bunch of explorers, and then they hit each other and then scatter.
And then scatter.
In Unleash, you had mentioned you can threshold that on like turn 2 as well. I don't even think you have to go on the top. Uh, but it gains 4 energy, and if you forget a card, you get more, and you can pay a bunch of energy to deal a bunch of damage. Well, it's really cool. It's really fun.
Yes. Another a third one, if we wanted to just jump in real quick,
Yeah.
is Infestation of Venomous Spiders. Add a beast, gather a beast, skip, X actions in the land for however many beasts are there, and generate also, that much fear for how many beasts are there, max 4. But it gets its threshold by playing Strike Low. So you have the double skip combo here,
Yeah, you're skipping the whole
which
island.
you're just skipping the island, but spiders while you're doing this is doing 4 damage plus, if there's any blight in there, plus, you're left an 8 of damage.
I took Vengeance of the Dead while playing the Spirit. I think this is the most powerful I've ever seen the card be. I was still pretty unimpressed, but I'm glad that there is the synergy here.
Yeah, Vengeance of the Dead is a really cool synergy with Vengeance. It had the unfortunate change to its rule set when Jagged Earth came out, and they created the action trees.
Yeah,
That it could no longer self-target itself. So like triggers could no longer self-trigger.
that's a little bit
That's
of
a
a
little
shame.
bit, complicated, yeah. But what it means is every time you destroyed something in the past, it would activate Vengeance again in the same land, and you could keep doing that every time you destroyed something. But with Jagged Earth, it can no longer do that.
Yeah. Some other strong major powers, Pensive Calamity. I don't even think you need a threshold this. You just remove a bunch of disease and it does a bunch of damage.
Yep.
Flocking Red Talons, I was pretty impressed with.
Vengeance gets extra damage on that one, so that thing.
Yeah. I was blowing up things I wasn't supposed to. It felt good.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. Instruments of Their Own Ruin was shockingly easy to threshold. I mean, the Force
is.
Sun, but that's all it took.
Yeah. Once, if you're on a team, or if you pick up the Gift of Nature's Connection, gives you 2 elements of the same kind. It allows you to hit those 4 thresholds, even on 3 card plays.
Yes. And with a lot of the gameplay style being to let them build up, you have a place to wipe out the adjacent lands. So instruments felt really good too. You had the strife
Yes.
and the invaders deal damage.
For sure. Another kind of unexpected one that players don't really have a big chance or lots of chances to utilize to such an effect is Focus the Land's Anguish, the 5 cost with Sun.
Yeah.
This allows you to gather blight from adjacent lands and pile them all up into one land. And if you have 3 Sun, it does extra damage per blight. And if you're Vengeance, it also does extra damage per blight. So this is doing 3x the damage it normally does.
I did not end up taking that major power, but that is a really fun synergy.
Yeah, it's not often where you get a lot of, blight down or even have enough energy, but if you just pick it up one time and say, I want to try this out.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun with Vengeance.
Cool. So the last major power that I want to pull out is Plague Ships Sail to Distant Ports. It adds a lot of disease. It's also the only major power that has all 4 of his elements.
Oh, okay.
Unless if we, count Unlock the Gates of Deepest Power. That's cheating.
Hand waved.
So what do you think about this card for this spirit?
Plague Ships is pretty good for Vengeance. The biggest thing about the card is that it has a coastal town restriction.
Yeah.
And Vengeance, with this card, can easily blow up coastal towns. So they disappear quite fast with this power, when making it harder to use.
I experienced that.
Yeah, suddenly, you're feeling great, you're thresholding this, you guys are paying for all the fear cards to go away, and then you're like, wait, where are all the cities? Oops.
They're gone.
They're gone, yep. So, it's really good, but you often can't get rid of, or can't perpetually use the power because you end up getting rid of everything, I think, with Vengeance. Although it is quite a thematic power with Vengeance on the ship.
Literally on the ship. Think about how big the spirit is.
It's crazy. And the ship's covered in, kind of its poisonous bile, I guess, is outcoming.
Yeah. It's really cool. So onto their G3, their third growth pattern, you can place a
Mhm.
disease. When do
Yes.
you do that?
Yeah, there's a lot of really tricky points that you can do this, but there's always a lot of extra factors to consider. Most often is in at least single six is there are many events that cause either extra damage or the adversary rules cause extra damage in the land. So, utilizing it as a quick means to do build prevention, of a town, just leaving the explorer there, often can get punished at a very high percentage chance. Just so in the difficulty range that I'm playing at, that opportunity is very risky to go for. But if you want to go for that risk, you're still gaining an extra card and potentially having extra opportunity cost from not having to deal with that land at the cost of your presence.
Hmm.
It also ends up being a play when you do very G3 heavy focus builds. So sometimes there are builds that exist where you're not G2ing. One of those being like Prussia 6, where you G3. Normally, at least for me, on the first two turns of Prussia, I like to G3 bottom and then G3 top track in order to get more powers to counter minor powers to counter Prussia, and it also allows you to play Fetid and Fiery Vengeance on turn one with two card plays, which can sometimes lead to getting ahead a lot since you can kill an explorer and prevent them from just building the town, into Prussia.
Anything to get ahead of Prussia.
Yeah, because Prussia's really fast, so we like to do that. And then in these G3 heavy builds, you don't get a lot of presence out, which means the lands that are ravaging and causing blight and putting disease in lands normally for vengeance aren't happening where you want all of those to happen. So sometimes you may need like a quick disease in a land where, oh, I didn't put a presence there. It has a blight now. It came up again, and I needed to skip it. So sometimes it happens where you want to throw a disease there, just a quick disease, because you need to get strike low targeting on that land.
That right
I don't know if
there
that's ever
is
happened to
what
you.
I experienced. It's like, I don't know when to do this, but I need a disease right now.
So I'm doing it.
Yep.
It happens. It happens. And then even in the late game, leveraging it when you don't need to actually progress your tracks anymore. You've already hit, 2-3 or 3-3 or something. Sometimes just throwing disease down for more scaling disease damage or city prevention fast, helpful. That's one less thing, to clear for a Terra 3 victory versus 3 extra damage in, another land. Maybe you only have 2 lands with cities, but dealing with the third land could be a lot of extra work. Fast disease, stops that.
When you place the disease is one of the most nuanced questions, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so hard to answer. I think you've done a wonderful job. Uh,
Oh, thank you.
but it's going to be situation to situation. And it'll take someone whose experience is you to have to assess the situation. I find that so cool that the spirit has enough depth that you have a general heuristic to place your presence, but you have to ask the
Mm-hmm.
question, when should I not?
Yeah, it's really hard to because it's just really beneficial early on to hitting those particular points with your hand size or your track, scaling by those turns that I mentioned earlier. So giving that up is quite difficult and almost not worth the cost, but so you have to really weigh it against that opportunity. But trying it out a couple times, even if it isn't the right choice, I think can really help players like learn and see what felt good versus what didn't feel good.
Mhm. The thing that feels worst about the spirit for me is probably their bottom track. It goes like two, and then a fire, and then another two. It just takes
Mm.
so long to get to three card plays, but it feels so important, a necessity. In fact, I always feel kind of behind when I'm playing the Spirit, if not by one card in hand or one card that I could play, one energy. Do you feel like that as well? Or when you watch other people play the Spirit, like they just always feel a little behind?
It's definitely not an unfamiliar feeling. I think I've been through that, what you're feeling, and I think other players can probably relate to that a lot. I know a lot of others that have played the Spirit or tried it out and feel like, wow, three card plays is really far and everything's really expensive, so they feel like they have to go top for some energy, rather than just barrel bottom, you know?
Hmm.
But the more that I've played it, my perspective has shifted. Focusing around trying to hit particular track progression. So certain, however much reveal, 2, 3, whatever, by certain turns really lets me know where I'm at and what I need to do in order to get there, or what sacrifices I need to make, in order to do that. And a lot of the times that just ends up being, I have to take some blight somewhere in order to be able to, get where I want to. And that's okay.
Do you like the left innate or the right innate more?
Ooh, that's a good question. Personally, I like the left innate more.
The same.
I like epidemics. It's really thematic.
Something that I noticed about that was to reasonably get the left online a little bit quicker was you had to go off the top and or for that animal tag. But the fire
Mm-hmm.
tag was on the bottom and it did the right
Mm.
innate, and I didn't want to as much.
Yeah. Getting use of the right innate requires intentionally letting things through, or intentionally like not dealing with certain things, or being in lands that you generally might not want to be in. And sometimes it doesn't actually, in the words of the Discord, solve a land for you, or make it so the land doesn't blight or clears the land or something. It kind of just effectively gets you one more fear.
Yeah, it felt like it was a badge fear generator.
Yeah, a lot of the times, for me, even though it's a poor fear generator, trying to combine it with other damaging effects is what makes it shine. Because it adds a little bit, even though it's almost a waste because it doesn't solve a land on its own, adding extra damage to other effects makes them even more potent,
Hmm.
because you're getting like those, plus one on like a blight from two damage abilities rather than one.
It felt like it scaled with your light is Badlands kind of weirdly. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
expecting that.
Yeah, it creates kind of awkward numbers. 2, 4. They're not, typically ideal numbers. Just getting rid of, 3 and 5 are kind of the most ideal.
Yeah.
But it does really interesting things when you can combine it with plague bearers, and um, in combination with other, majors or minor powers, I think.
Hmm.
I like the effect. I don't think it's bad by any means. I think it just has different use cases than we strive to want them for.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. So throughout your history of playing the Spirit, has there been any standout moment that like just makes you excited thinking about it?
Hmm. I think you know I'm not a huge high difficulty player. I do tap, into doubles here and there, and 6/6 or dual adversary, both at level 6. So when I had the opportunity, to kind of solo play some of those, or like one of the hardest matchups back in the day, which would Sweden and Habsburg livestock colony at both level 6.
That's a lot. That's
I
hard.
was able is really difficult, especially because the first Ravage is dealing usually over 8 damage, and it's Sweden. So the rules mean you add 2 Blight, which are
Yeah,
both loss conditions for HLC. So in solo, that's a loss, and then if you're paired with one Spirit, 2 of those is a loss. But I was able to overcome those, actually. I was able to beat it with Vengeance in solo, and then Vengeance paired with Finder as a duo. So I'm always really kind of happy thinking about that moment that the spirit can kind of handle one of these really really difficult matchups. Even if it can't handle all of them.
that sounds super cool. I I went through all of the adversaries solo, but none of the 6/6s. I find them intimidating, overwhelming, that sometimes you just lose on turn two.
Yeah, there's a lot of reiteration, and it doesn't have like a high win rate or anything because it's pretty RNG
Hmm.
dependent on getting the right explorers, no events that like insta kill you and stuff like that.
But you did it.
But yeah, I mean, takes a bunch of tries. It's probably somewhere lower than like 30% win rate or something,
30%?
but
That's not bad.
it can reliably, I think, make it past the first couple of turns. But closing out the game ends up proving pretty challenging, more so than just surviving.
Yeah,
But it's pretty good at the initial survival, whereas many spirits will just die on the initial survival.
for sure. If you don't have a skip in that situation, you're in a bit of a trouble. You had mentioned Finder. I found Finder to be one of the better uh, spears to play with. I made that
Mm-hmm.
giant mountain of disease, and they let me continue to blow up that land. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I think Finder is probably Vengeance's best partner. It has a lot of control mechanisms. Its isolate is really valuable when paired with Vengeance. Um, and Vengeance can kind of like donate its Dahan to Finder. It has the built-in skip. This allows Finder to not have to draft, a skip for survival, but can just focus on, finding the nuke. And Vengeance also drafts majors really well, so it helps find the nuke. So you can kind of work on your draft situations together to find combo nukes within the deck between both of the spirits. So it's not just relying on Finder for drafting something. Vengeance can draft, part of the nuke, and Finder can draft the other part or the support powers to support the nuke. And that flexibility really like enhances the pair's capabilities. Not to be deck reliant, but like they can really synergize with each other in that way since they already have the survivability aspect and the control mega control aspect solved for the puzzle.
I'm so glad that I like feel like I hit it on the head internally. It's like this feels good. It's good, right? Have an expert
It
telling me it
really
is.
feels good. There's a lot of fun Finder combinations, but I mean, Vengeance Finder really feels quite good together.
Yeah,
It's a really interesting synergy.
I agree. Uh, Looking through the deck, ignore the major powers. Are there any minor powers that are a must take, or is it just too board situation dependent?
The classic answer is probably it depends on the adversary and the situation, but to give a better answer than that, I want to say two different powers at least. I'll say three, but one is kind of unfair. So the first one is Sky's Herald. It's not a power you think of often, and people kind of find it generally overcosted, but light manipulation on Vengeance and presence restoration on Vengeance is quite good. And Daha manipulation.
Card
You
does a
get
lot.
three things in one package. But it really allows like even just like one disease to shine, or your first tier innate of Savage Revenge to shine. Because now you're dealing 3 damage with the first both of the first innates in those lands when you group it together. And it activates epidemics. It gives a lot of splash elements, sun, moon, plant, which has more diversity if you're trying to draft majors. And because the spirit is a little bit blight heavy for people, it, there's a lot of blighted events that will destroy your presence some more, and that just means more disease. You have Sky's Herald putting you back in. You're also, you know, compensating and mitigating that effect and getting more disease every time. So blighted events can be really beneficial and high value for vengeance in such situations. So I think the card um, generally is not seen too favorably, I think, among the community, but I think it's a really, really cool pick on Vengeance or even on teams with Vengeance.
I feel like Sky's Herald does a lot of really small things, and
Mm-hmm.
it comes together as like a really neat package. And whenever you find a spot for it, it feels good.
Yeah, it's a little costly. It is a one cost, and meta meta players, we've started to dislike one cost, sadly.
That's about two
But
thirds of the deck.
yeah, it's a lot of powers. But not to dive too much into that. I really love Sky's Herald, and
Yeah.
I'll happily take it on Vengeance and play games with it. And it really reminds me of some like really fun moments that you can't really experience on other spirits or with other powers. It creates kind of a unique game on its own. Now the other one is more tactical. It's Teeming Rivers.
Okay.
So another similar one, which this one's water, sun, plant, animal. You can add a beast or remove a blight in a mountains or wetlands. Only if there's one blight there, you can remove it. Um, Blight removal is not the thing you'd normally think of when playing Vengeance, but in many matchups, it allows you to control staying healthy, and it allows you to also manipulate your blight. So you may have it in a land, you may do, some damage in the land, and the land's clear, or the land now has no cities in it, or something, or becomes like a low priority, and you're like, well, I don't need to, focus on that anymore. Removing a blight in that land allows you to go blight another land, get a disease in another land, and start, doing more damage with those Badlands pings with that blight in the city, while still maintaining kind of healthy or having high blight available on the card. It allows you to not play your skip for a turn. It causes a lot of strategical leverage, and creates a means to use instead of your skip. So it creates this like really good strategic leverage, I think, with Vengeance, and allows it to just sponge damage in the lands, or just throw a beast somewhere. Beasts have a really good event proc rate, so
Yeah. I wasn't expecting either of those two. That was really exciting for me.
that's good.
Yeah.
Keep it exciting.
I
The
was
third
expecting
one,
to hear something else. What's the third one?
third one is one of the strong powers in the game, Gift of Nature's Connection. This power is, quite good on a lot of different spirits, but on Vengeance, it's of course really good as well because, like we talked about earlier, it allows you to get those 4 threshold majors, like
Yeah,
that require 4 elements in the threshold, down to 3. So you can play it on 3 card plays because Vengeance's 4 card plays is really difficult to reach,
it
first
is.
of all. And then, secondly, it also reduces your tier 2 innates down to tier 1 levels, essentially. So you can hit those with 2 card plays.
I frequently wanted someone to give me an element.
Yes.
Okay. So, what's the most thematic minor power?
Oh, the most thematic one. For Vengeance? This is tough. I don't have an answer off the top of my head, to be honest. But, I mean, I think most people would probably point at Flesh Rot.
Flesh Raw Fever. That's what I would point at
Yeah.
as well. I think there are plenty of disease oriented cards, but Flesh Rot
Mm-hmm.
Fever is the only power that has fire, wind, water, and animal on it.
Yeah, it aligns elementally quite perfect for vengeance. So it's hard to make an argument, you know, from that standpoint. I think the only other contender is infested aquifers. Now this card is crazy for vengeance.
So something that's kind of cool is if you want to, and I don't think most of the time you do, but if you wanted to threshold your left and right innate to the maximum ability, Flesh Rot Fever is a necessary card.
That is really cool.
Yeah,
So
just my little just going through the cards, examining things like, oh, this is needed.
can elemental boon
You need
achieve that, or
four.
does it
You need
have to
four.
be? You need all 4.
hmm
I didn't
If
even know that, so that's something I learned from you today.
if someone is assisting you, you could do it with
Of
Elemental
course.
Boon, but by yourself, you can do it with four card plays as long as one of them
Hmm.
is that.
Really cool. That's a cool fact to share.
Do you have a
Hmm.
board preference?
I boast about it a lot on the Discord. I think Vengeance's favorite board is probably board C.
I agree, and I don't really have a good way to articulate it. I felt like they had access to everything they wanted, though.
Yes, it. I actually have a guide on BGG. I'm trying to pull it up now, and I think I added a picture. Maybe I didn't add the picture to it. Talking about board preference and why. Oh, it's there. Board strategies. Uh, I'll just read out some of the things that I wrote on it. But it's Vengeance. It's the only board Vengeance starts in a blighted land with 2 Dahan, which is a big thing for events giving extra energy and bonus effects for having Dahan in your lands.
Yeah.
And also where their setup is one range within every land except Coastal Land 3, which is easy because you can either G3 or G2 around it into the adjacent lands. Generally, going into that land 2 with the city is preferred because coastals come up a lot and ravage a lot, and you just want more blight and disease, in the city lands.
Yeah, you just want to be there.
Exactly. And so the 2 Dahan in starting land 5, yeah, talked about that. And it's one of the easiest lands to Plague Bearers your things into, and in combination with Fiery Vengeance or your Savage Revenge, your right innate. This board also has all the lands 2 range. Some boards may have, placements or restrictions where you're 3 range away from some things, either based on setup or if you've lost presence, which is very common for Vengeance. But this one, if you're central on land 5, everything's within 2 range of Plague Bearers. And, some other good majors, spiders generally require Sacred Sight, range 2. So you don't have to worry about those 3 range restrictions.
Speaking of Sacred Site, I feel like one of the boards has you starting on a Sacred Site, and I didn't like that board.
I think it's board F. It's either board F or board E.
It was just a notable thing that the boards felt pretty meaningfully different. Most of them were kind of
Yeah.
flat, but one of them was like, ooh, I want to avoid that one. And board C felt good.
Yeah, board C is pretty balanced board for many spirits, and for that reason, like there's no like overwhelming detriments to it that end up being just favorable for vengeance in most situations. I have noted other boards which are actually F, which even if I think there is a sacred site there, there are still some really good opportunities available for it. And board B is another fun one. Board B kind of like creates this interesting micro dynamic on the board where like the board is split between north and south, and you kind of have to manage both.
Hmm.
And for Sweden, board E is really fun
I'll have to try that
because
matchup.
the blight moves from land 4 to land 5, adding more flexibility.
Interesting. Do you like playing against any particular adversary? Like the most?
I really like and love Prussia.
Gotta
I
go
think,
fast.
yeah, the rule simplicity is really nice a lot of the times. So it's kind of just a relaxing, evening game that you can kind of get in. without having to think too much. And there's a lot of interesting, puzzles about Prussia, how the spirit can handle such, fast-paced adversary in, the time that they give you, because it's missing so many extra cards and turns from the deck.
Yeah. So HME, Habsburg Mining,
Hmm.
they shift how the disease functions. Do you like that?
Yes, I was actually um, part of the playtesting team for Nature's Incarnate, and um, while we were playtesting it, I think disease did not actually function with like the adversary. Like it basically kind of removed Vengeance's SR in like the earlier versions,
Oh,
so that
wow.
it like couldn't ignore them or anything like that. So I had proposed to them, is it possible to still have Vengeance's SR like interact with this, and like if it was feasible, and they made it kind of happen. So it creates a really interesting matchup for Vengeance.
It felt kind of special. Uh, it was unlike any other matchup. It was unique, challenging, really engaging.
Yeah, I think so as well. Uh, just because you have even more choices now, so it's a little bit overwhelming and also confusing in terms of how to execute the rules from the first time.
Yes,
But once you get a hang of it, it offers a pretty different experience.
I
And I
agree.
think having like a different experience like that in the game is probably worth the effort if it's not too much overhead.
Yeah. It's not a scenario, but it almost feels like it with Vengeance versus HME. So it's really cool.
Totally.
There's like a lot of different events that have disease associated with them, and they very frequently don't matter, but they do when you're playing the spirit. What do you think
Yes.
about that?
I think my thoughts overall are the spirit is kind of more immune to events. They end up being a little bit more on the beneficial side, um, because the ignores don't make you lose fear for those builds.
Yeah.
Vengeance also modifies the disease, and Eric has clarified kind of on BGG that because they're both modifiers and kind of at the same time, you can choose the order. So you could choose not to gain the fear if you wanted to, but still being able to get it is really big for the spirits, SR overall, and resilience against the events, because it can manipulate them, and because it still likes to profit off of that fear and let the builds through more often than not. Ignore for builds doesn't really matter too much for Vengeance. It likes creating those stacks, and it often is just doing those, and it often plays its skip on the turn that you get stricken. So stricken, for the listeners, is if land has disease or strife in it, it'll skip the ravage. So when I'm playing, I'm often like, oh, I could have just not played my, strike low this turn, but you never know when those are coming up. So
Stricken is one of those events that makes me want to bang my head on the wall. It hurts you so much whenever you put in the effort to move the Dahan and defend appropriately. And in other
yes,
times, you're like, I want to skip this, so I'll spend my skip. And Stricken comes up and it's like, nah, we got you. Like,
it's so funny. Yeah, you can never count on stricken, so it kind of just happens, and a lot of players probably feel frustrated at the end of the day by it.
it's it's fine.
It happens. It's one of the more tame things, in the deck compared to stuff like farmers and some other ones that are
Yeah,
really brutal.
for sure. If you like Vengeance, someone's newish to Spirit Island, they played Vengeance, they like it. What other spirits would you recommend they try?
Hmm. It's hard to say because there's actually not too many that are like Vengeance. I think
They're unique.
it's quite unique, especially with the blight taking mechanism. There's different ways to look at it, So if you kind of like the art and the theming of the spirit in that way, I like, Downpour as a recommendation just because they have the same artist and kind of similar vibes in that regard. If you like being, someone who's more secretive to their beast synergies and beast capabilities, Vengeance and, Bringer is another one of those type of spirits, and it's also a big fear generator in that way. If you like, control and some of kind of the Dahan strategies, Thunderspeaker or Many Minds kind of feels similar to that type of control aspect. And if you want the complexity of the decisions and the depth, similar feeling, for how Vengeance builds and how Vengeance chooses powers, Fangs and Finder end up being similar in that way.
Pretty big spread.
Yeah.
What do you think other people think about Vengeance? You seem to love the spirit, but does the community think it's too strong, a little too weak, or do they think it's right in the middle?
Um, I've never really polled, for the community thoughts on this, just from observation alone here. I think most view it as. So let me say the Discord community recognizes that it can be pretty good into single six, and it can handle a couple double adversaries and stuff like that. Um, and they know that it takes probably a little bit of practice because it's really tricky. But in general, comparative to when you pull in all the spirits and you take a bigger look at the picture, it's not actually, that strong of a spirit. There's a lot of things that are much stronger than it within the space, and can have like much more capabilities, either more carry potential, handle things a lot stronger, clear things a lot stronger, or more certain outcomes or certain victories, more secure victories or consistency and stuff like that. So I think overall, the community may find it's an okay spirit. It takes a bit of practice even just to get it to okay. So maybe it's a little bit, on the weaker end. And I think from some past conversations with, we call them the Greens in the Discord, but like Ted and Eric and them, because they have green names in the Discord.
The Greens.
And
they're a bunch of aliens.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, they think that it, ended up kind of on the weaker end, as well. Probably due to some last minute nerfs. If you've ever seen the pre-released version of Vengeance, it's quite crazy. And it's like a totally different spirit. But
Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to speak about?
I think we talked about a lot. It's pretty good.
Awesome.
Just maybe questions for you, or
Yeah.
after all of this, what are your thoughts on Vengeance? How much do you like it, and did you learn anything new while talking?
Wow. Yeah, I did learn quite a bit from playing a lot of the game with Vengeance. And then chatting with you now, a few new things came up where I was like, that's completely new to me. So that's really fun. For example, some of the minor powers that you chose, I may have seen them in a draft and thought about some of their synergies, but I would not have presented them as something that's notably powerful. So that was really fun.
Mm-hmm.
As for where do I think of the spirit, in terms of power, it's like a little below average. Approximately what you said. As for fun, they're pretty close to the bottom for me.
Ooh.
Yeah, which might be a little shocking because I played a lot of the spirit and I feel as though I'm talking about them reasonably positively.
Yeah,
But
it seems quite positive, from the chat.
exactly. I did like my games of the spirit. Whenever I started, they were probably last place in terms of enjoyment. And now they're
Mm-hmm.
in the bottom third.
Moved up a little bit, so that's some
They moved up
improvement.
a little bit. They're not my first choice, nor my second, but I would happily play them.
Oh, that's cool to hear. Yeah, personally, they're still, within my top, 3 or 4 or whatever.
Yeah, there's some spirits that just don't click for people. And this is
Yeah.
one of them for me.
That's totally fair. I mean, that's the beauty of Spirit Island. There's a lot of different spirits that appeal to a lot of different people, so it captures a really wide variety of players.
Absolutely. I've really enjoyed our chats. Is there anywhere that you want people to be able to find you, contact you, Discord, Board Game Geek, etc.?
Oh, if you just, yeah, I mean, if they, want, they can reach out to me on Discord, in the Spirit Island Discord. It's just like at Ray or at Arcadia. And I think my BGG is Aqualacy. Probably a little bit hard to spell. And it's also like VZ Ray on the Spirit Island Reddit. I'm on there. I'm on all of them, occasionally here and there. So, if they have questions or just shout outs or want to say hi or anything, I'm more than happy to answer questions and talk.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having a chat with me. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you as well for the chat. Really fun. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us on this discussion on Vengeance with Ray. I love hearing others' perspectives on spirits, especially ones as complex as Vengeance. Hopefully this resonated with you and we'll be able to take some of the concepts home for your own games. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the podcast and share with your friends. Continue the conversation by joining our Discord. Links found below. Bye-bye.